Okay, well, at this point, I'm going to intro our speaker, Dan Nelson, who's going to be speaking for us today. He was up here. So Dan and Melinda, these guys are missionary rock stars. And I don't know if you caught this, but did you hear the transition that's going on in their ministry? So these guys, for most of their career, served full-time down in Mexico. We've been blessed to have them here. And notice they're transitioning to equipping and training missionaries that are going out. And so there's a cool transition in the life of what, an elder missionary? Okay, you've lived some life, you've experienced some things.
Got some scars.
Yeah, and you guys are in a unique position to come alongside and equip new missionaries as they're going out in the field. So thank you, Dan and Melinda, for your service. And thanks, Dan, for leading our missions team and helping put together our morning here. And we're looking forward to hearing from you today. So please welcome our friend, Daniel Nelson.
Thanks, Pastor. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a crazy, hectic year for us. I think we're finally starting to get a sense of where God has taken us in this next phase of our lives. I want to pray or thank you for your prayers for Melinda. She's with me today. She's had some health challenges and continues to struggle some, but is on the mend. And so we appreciate your prayers. We've really felt loved by Grace Bible Chapel in these months as we've been going through this, and so thank you for that. And also, before I forget, I want to thank our missionaries. I think we'll have a few more that are coming for the second service, but thanks for taking the time to come and to be with us. And I really hope you take advantage of the opportunities to get to know them, talk with them, take some of their materials, sign up for their newsletters, and as Pastor mentioned, consider becoming a partner with them. Don't be the missing link is what I titled this, and I think it'll be clear. I'm not doing an evolution sermon here. It's a little different that I want to focus in today. In 1977, the deadliest accident in aviation history occurred. It was on the Spanish island of Tenerife. Two Boeing 747 jets collided. One jet was taking off, and it collided with another jet that was taxiing on the runway. 583 people died in that accident, and there were 61 survivors of that accident. Well, as they do, and we've had some airline accidents that in the news recently. They did an investigation, an in-depth investigation. What they did is identified a chain of events that had occurred that led to 583 souls dying. Earlier in the day, terrorists had exploded a bomb in the airport of Gran Canaria, which was a little bit a ways away. And as I was researching, I don't think anybody died from the bomb. But what they had, it was at this airport, and so they had to divert the flights. And so both of these flights, one was a Pan Am 747, the other was a KLM, were diverted to the nearby island of Tenerife, since they couldn't land at the Gran Canaria airport. There was adjusting, and as they refueled and decided where they were going to go, a fog set in on the island, limiting visibility. As the KLM jet was getting ready to take off, the pilot radioed the tower and said, "Ready for takeoff." And the tower radioed back and confirmed with the jet the route that he was going to take, or the jet was going to take when it took off from the taxiway. The pilot interpreted that as a go-ahead to take off. It wasn't real clear. There was some garbled radio traffic and the pilot turned on the jets and took off while the Pan Am jet was still taxiing on the runway, since it was so packed because of other planes that had landed. They were using the runway for taxiing, and seconds later, 583 people were dead. If that chain of events had been broken at any one of those points, 583 people would still have been alive. If a bomb hadn't been exploded at the Gran Canaria airport, if there hadn't been any fog, if there had been a clear instruction from the tower, if the pilot had understood or even asked the second, "Are you giving me clearance?" If there had been a clearer understanding between communication between the pilot and the tower, but every single one of those chain events, if any of them had been omitted, those people would have been alive after that. But because of this chain of events that led one after another, and they all led to this disaster. I want to go to Romans 10, and we're going to see a similar chain of events. Now, you can have a chain of events, in this case, that leads to a disaster, and if any of those links had been missing, many people would have been saved. But I'm going to talk to you about a different chain of events, because this is a chain of events which Paul presents to us that we cannot miss any of the links. If any of the links are missing, it's going to end up in people dying. So in the case of the airline disaster, we would have liked to have seen people or one of these chain of events missing. In this case, it's just the opposite. We can't miss any of these links in this chain. Let's look at the sequence. We're going to start Romans 10. And Paul starts off in chapter 10. Let me give you a little bit of background on Romans. Paul is writing the book of Romans to the church in Rome. And he hasn't visited. He's planning on visiting at some point. He mentions in chapter 16 that he's hoping to get to see them at some point in the near future. But he's writing, and he's basically presenting a for lack of a better term, a doctrinal paper, a treatise on the gospel. And it's really a clearly laid out a presentation of the different elements of the gospel. He starts talking about our lostness, chapters 1. He focuses in chapter 2 on the Jewish people and talks about not only those who are not Jews are lost, the Gentiles, but he says the Jews also. He goes into chapter 3 and talks, and we've memorized some of these verses about how we're all separated from God because of our sin. And he goes into how we're justified by faith. He goes back to the Old Testament and talks about Abraham and how Abraham was justified by his faith. He talks about some of the challenges that happen after you come to faith in Christ. And then in chapter 8, he talks about the security that we have once we've made that decision to place our trust in Christ, that nothing can separate us from the love of God. Then in chapters 9, 10, and 11, he kind of takes a parenthesis. And chapter 12, he's going to start talking about some of the implications. But he's talking specifically about the Jewish people. And that's where we're at in chapter 10. And Paul says this, verse 1, it says, "Brother, my heart's desire and prayer to God for the Israelites is that they may be saved." Paul had a passion